It's a pronunciation guide. So if you're not real good with Hebrew, you can at least pronounce it correctly. And then they put the English translation underneath, so you know what it is you're actually praying. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I need that. I'm sure there's lots of American Jews that need that. But here, this is the page that to me is the most important. This is the list, the order of all the steps of what you do at a Passover. Now, the thing about the Passover is that it's become unique to each family, to each community, to each country. There's even a page in here where they talk about one of the foods that they make here. They make this thing, charaset. It's kind of a fruit mixture. It's supposed to look like the mortar that they would have built the bricks with in Egypt. Okay. But on here, it talks about all the different things people put in them. In some places, it's molasses and walnuts, and other places they're putting orange juice and raisins in it. And I mean, it's all unique. And then they even have, of course, being very modern, they have a link at the bottom, for other recipes, go to this webpage and go find more. But, it's just this idea that we each own it. And when we own it, then we're thinking more about it and what we're doing. And this book is here to tell them why they're doing what they're doing. Why are we doing this? And that's one of the most famous parts of a Passover ritual, is that after one of the cups of wine is shared and some of the meal has started, the youngest child who's capable of asking it asks the question, why is tonight different from all other nights? And there's a bunch of other questions that they ask. And they go through the story and remind everyone in the room why we're here. Remind everyone of what happened. It's a ritual. And sometimes in a ritual, the problem that happens is when we don't own it and we don't try to live into it, we just go through the motions of doing it. That's when it loses its beauty and its meaning. When it just becomes a bunch of words that we hurry up and get through so that we can move on to the next thing. When I was supply preaching between calls, there were always two things that fascinated me in every church I went to. The first one is, since I was a reverend, I almost always got picked to go somewhere because they wanted to do communion. I mean, that was the point. You had to have a pastor back then. We didn't have elders trained to do it. So it had to be a pastor. So I would every Sunday be doing communion somewhere, just about. And every single church did it differently. Every single one. Because think about all the different ways you can do it. We might pass trays in the pews, or people come up to the front, or they come up to the front and they just, like in the Christian church, if any of you have been over there, they just come up and just take it off the table, go sit down, we all take it together. Or like we do here, and I give you the bread and you take your cup and you go sit down. Or in my mother's church, you're given your little cup empty as you come up to the rail, you kneel, you're given your bread, then they pour the stuff into your cup and you drink it and give it to somebody else and go back. The prayers are always never quite in the same order. There's always something a little different. Do I invite the elders up early, or do they stay in the back? Or what? How do we do this? There's always all these mechanics to making this happen. And heaven help you if you don't do them right. Heaven help you. Because then people stand there like, what do I do now? And so I would get very detailed instructions. Okay, how are we doing this? And yet at the end of the day, it's the exact same ritual. We're all taking bread and cup. We're all sharing in the feast of the Lord. But we've all done it just a little bit differently. Sometimes it's the literal structure of the sanctuary that determines it. Sometimes it's the fact that we had a pastor who at one point, broke a hip and couldn't go down the stairs anymore, so we rearranged everything and then we just kept it because we liked it, or whatever the reason. But that's how rituals sometimes operate. The other thing in all the churches I noticed, the other one was always the Lord's Prayer, because I frequently would get the word wrong. I deaded when I should have trespassed or whatever. I did a lot of that. But I was always shocked at how fast people said it. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. It's like, are you even hearing the words you're saying? Are you even thinking about what you're saying? Or are you just spewing these out so that it's done and we can move on and I can pick my head up and open my eyes again? And that is when ritual starts to me to go wrong, is because then it's just become one more thing I got to do. It's lost its meaning if we're not thinking about the words that we're saying, if we're not thinking about what it is that we're doing. And in the Passover, what God is telling them is that this is going to be a festival to the Lord. A festival, not just a recitation. This is a festival. This is supposed to be alive. Festivals are supposed to be fun and engaging, and they're supposed to bring joy and laughter and talking and all sorts of things. If we don't bring that joy into the rituals that we do, if we don't bring that curiosity, if we don't bring that wanting to make it real, to make it present, then why are we doing it? What are we doing? We're just reciting a bunch of words really quickly so we can get through it one more time. And that's not helpful either. The Passover is the central point in the life of the Hebrews. And for Jesus and his followers, they were all Jews. This was the highlight of the year, was the Passover. This was the most important festival. For a long time in Christianity, it was, lots of people didn't always come to church, especially when it was kind of, state-run churches in Europe and things. People didn't go all the time. But you were required to go once a year. And do you know when it was? Easter. I think that's part of the reason why Easter still to this day, everybody feels like they have to go to church on Easter. You had to show up on Easter and perform confession beforehand and take communion that day to prove you were in good standing in the church and not get a fine by the state for being out of sorts and being either a recusant or being, a protester of some sort, that you were all good because you showed up on Easter and took communion. What does that do to communion? If that's the only reason you're taking it, is because somebody's requiring you to do this once a year. I will tell you, there were a lot of rituals and a lot of things that had to be done a certain way to become a pastor, and I did not view my ordination exams as a ritual worth repeating, because they did not move me to joy. They did not, lead me to think deeper. What they led me to do was hurry up and get this done and do it right so that I don't ever have to do this again. And unfortunately, that's what so many of our rituals become. Hurry up and get this done so that I can move on to X, Y, and Z. And that, I think, is where we fall short. That's our problem. That's not propelling us into the future. That's a part of what this festival and the celebration was supposed to be, was a preparation for the future. It's not just about looking back, it's about looking forward and being ready for what comes next. Everything will become new. Their power is to propel us into the future, to show us what's possible. It's a way for us to remember what God has done and who we are and ground ourselves, but at the same time, think about what's possible. What's possible. People are still being liberated around the world, just as the Hebrews were. Lives are still being renewed. Hope is still being restored, just as it was for them. And that's true every year. Every year. So, yes, we are called to remember our past. Of course we are. But we're also called to take these rituals and make them our own, to the point that they speak to where we need to go, where we need to be, and not just be rigidly set in stone. The Passover, of all things, is not. There's a framework, there's an order, but even that has changed. They don't roast whole lambs anymore. Trust me, they don't. Most people either get a lamb shank or, in most cases, a chicken, which is definitely not a whole lamb, because that's not really something that's, one, doable, and that, most people are, if you live in an apartment in New York, you can't really roast a lamb on a spit in your living room. I mean, it doesn't work. So how do you make this real and accessible and still meaningful? And I think that's what our Jewish brothers and sisters have done a really good job of over the centuries, is figuring out ways to do that. Here's what we have to do. Now, how can we do it in a way that not only speaks to us, but to where we need to go? But I absolutely, when I saw this the other day, absolutely loved this. One of the things, it says Passover's two major requirements.